I was into Ouija boards a lot, and I went into a lot of studying demonology and things like that. Now that I got rid of that and had the realization that if God is in me, Satan has no power over me at all.
Hi, Grandma.
Hi, son.
We have a very special guest joining us today. Yep, we've had people ask us to interview more Thief in the Night actors, of which you are.
Yes.
And it's even better because you're Grandma. That's right. That's the best part of all.
That is.
Yeah. But so should we get right into it?
I think we should.
Okay. Yeah. Well, before this, we already did 2 videos on you and asked you about questions and your life and heard your perspective on things and kind of how you met Grandma in your early life.
Right.
And so it's going to be very fun interviewing Grandma now.
Right.
So, Grandma.
Yes.
Tell us from the beginning, what were the early days like?
The early days of our marriage, you mean?
No, your early days.
Oh, my early days.
Yeah.
Okay. Was born in Long Beach, California.
Okay.
And it was really interesting. I was a large baby, and the doctor that was supposed to be delivering me was not there. He was on vacation, and I was born in a place called Harriman Jones Clinic, 2 blocks from the beach. And the doctor that took over should have done a C-section on my mom, but didn't. So they came out while she was in labor and told my dad that I was going to be born dead and that my mom was probably going to pass away also. And
I don't
he
remember
prayed.
this story.
Oh, yeah, he prayed. Mm-hmm. He got down on his knees there in the waiting room and prayed. And I was born okay, and my mom was okay too. She was never able to have any other children. But God really worked it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Currently, let's fast forward just real quick. You have your PhD, you're a doctorate, you're a tenured professor.
It's an EDD.
EDD, but you're a doctorate.
Right, Doctor of Education.
Mm-hmm. Your father, my great-grandfather, has an interesting story.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him.
Okay, he was born in Miraculous, Lithuania in 1898, so that was part of the Tsarist Russia at that time. And his father came over from the old country, really Lithuania, and established himself in Pittsburgh, and then sent for my grandmother and my father and his sister. My dad, as a young child, was he was very powerfully built. He never got to be very tall. He was like 5'7", but he was a barrel-chested individual. Tom has said one time that he was the strongest short man that he had ever known.
Wow.
Anyway, he was dropped on his head by one of his aunts.
Holy cow.
Yeah, and it took him a while to walk then again. And he also, it was on a farm. It was a rural area in Lithuania, and they had coals that they had on the ground, that he fell into those. And as an adult, I remember he would show his legs where he still had the scars where he had been burned by the coals.
Wow.
Yeah.
But he came over when he was a young boy to America.
Right, he came over about 1906. It's kind of hard to figure it out because that was an area of the world that there wasn't a lot of records that were kept. My grandmother never knew exactly what day he was born.
Yeah. Wow.
So he kind of guessed at what he was. He didn't have a birth certificate. So when he became a citizen, that was difficult. And when he eventually got Social Security, because he had paid into it for like 50 years, it was difficult to get the Social Security because when he came over on the ship, they made his name, instead of Kvyatkauskas, which is Lithuanian, they made it Kvyatnov because that was Russian and that was more familiar to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, he came over through Ellis Island.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You think there's any
steerage, which meant third class. On
very lowest.
Yeah, either you're low up or you're on deck, one of the two.
And interesting story, he was in Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
And he hopped freight cars as a hobo.
Yeah. When the stock market crashed, he was doing pretty good in Pittsburgh. He worked in the steel mills.
Is this the stock of the 30s?
Yes.
1929.
Yeah. He was doing well in Pittsburgh. He was working in the steel mills. He went to Carnegie Tech for a little bit, but he had to give up his schooling because the doctor said if he continued his education, he was going to be blind because he was studying by kerosene lamp. Wow. He came up with the idea in the steel mills. You know, the middle goes overhead on cables at that time, and it had the wheels that, you know, went around the cable like this. Well, it would shift sometimes and fall off, and people might die underneath because it was hot molten steel.
Yeah, we don't like that.
He came up with the idea of that little flange that goes underneath
to hold it on.
To hold it on.
Yeah. Smart.
Yes. Anyway, he went to get his pay one day, and the pay gal looked at him and said, "Your leg's bleeding." And he looked down, and his whole leg was bleeding because a piece of steel had flown into his leg, which he still had when he died. You could feel it in his leg.
Just a little souvenir of the past, you know. You like to have a souvenir of the places
Something
you were.
to remember everything by.
Sure.
Anyway, he was a smoker, and he smoked pipes and cigars and cigarettes and everything. And
you still have some of his pipes.
Yep, and he asked God, he said, "If you want me to quit smoking, take the desire away." And he went to bed, and he woke up the next morning and had no desire for any kind at all.
Wow.
So he threw away everything and never smoked again. But he could still roll a cigarette when in the 1960s, and that was like 40, 50 years after he gave up smoking.
That's cool.
Yeah, he could still roll a perfect cigarette. It was amazing. Anyway, the stock market crashed, and he had a dream that he was going to meet the love of his life in a White House by the... Oh, sorry. This is really important. But it's really sensitive to me because it was God working. He had a dream that he was going to... And he saw God's hand. And he saw the nail piercing in God's hand in his dream. And he saw my mother, an image of her in the clouds. And God said to him, "You're going to meet the love of your life, your wife. You go over 3 mountain ranges." So you have the Allegheny Mountains, you have the Rocky Mountains, you have the San Gabriel Mountains, and you're going to, and he didn't think about that at the time, but God said you're going to go over 3 mountain ranges, and you'll find her in a White House by the beach.
With a picket fence.
With a picket fence. Did it have picket fence? Okay. Anyway, he came out here, and he was working out here. He hopped freights out here. He got picked up in Hobo Junction by a Christian couple down in L.A., and they asked him if he wanted to work, and he said yes. And the gentleman who picked him up said, "I am the gardener to the Bixby's," which were a big family and owned a lot of Long Beach at that time. "And we live in Palos Verdes, and our neighbor, Mrs. Brightman, needs to have a gardener. I will teach you how to be a gardener." And so Monty and Malvola Montgomery took my dad, and he lived with him, and he taught him how to garden, and he started working for Mrs. Mary C. Brightman, or Dr. Mary C. Brightman, I should say.
Wow.
And he worked for her until he retired. Well, he worked for her son after that, because she had passed away. And that's how he got out here. He working in their house and in her house, which were big houses in Long Beach, in the Bluff area, in the Belmont Shores area. And my mom started working for the son and his wife. And my dad walked in one day, and there was the new maid and cook, and he looked at her and said, "You're my dream girl." They dated for 5 years, and then they got married. Didn't want to rush things.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. They spent a lot of time. He was a great bowler. He 298 was the best he ever did. He didn't get a 300.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But he had thought about going pro, but he didn't.
Wish some of his bowling skills
I
wore off on
mine
me.
too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Isn't that hereditary?
Yeah. Anyway, it was a bowling alley on the old Pike in Long Beach, the amusement park down there, and they dated there for 5 years. And
Now, your dad, my great grandfather.
yes,
He did not speak any English when he came over.
no,
Only Lithuanian.
yeah,
And so
Yes.
he had to learn English.
right. Yeah, he was about 6, 7, 8 years old
That's
about
amazing.
at that time.
Did he come over with his parents?
He came over with his mother and his sister.
Wow.
Yeah, there was
So his
one.
dad
There was
stayed
one
over
child that was a daughter that was born in Lithuania and died. So they had.
Wow.
they
I
just
always
did.
wonder what that side of the family over there is like today.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
Well, if you had met any of the ones that came over here, he never went back to Pittsburgh. Let me put it like that. It was like Eastern Europeans like to argue a lot. They like to fight, And we would visit my aunt and uncle in Denver, and he was Polish, and she was, of course, Lithuanian, and they would fight. She would yell at him in Lithuanian, he would yell at her in Polish, and then they'd stop, and she would look at me and say, "Did your dad teach you any of these words?" And I said, "Well, some." But
That's hilarious.
And it gave him a headache every time we went there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting is great-grandfather, his name was Whitey.
Yes.
That was his nickname, right?
Yes, it was his nickname because he had white hair
Wow.
when he was young, and he got scarlet fever,
Oh.
and the hair fell out. And when it came back in, it came in this color. But he had already gotten the nickname Whitey.
Interesting. Now, he got entangled with Amy Semple McPherson.
Yes, when he came out here, he was Catholic. If you're Lithuanian, you're either Jewish or Catholic.
Okay.
And he was Catholic. And he came out here and hooked up with Amy McPherson in the 30s. And was a preacher on the street. And
Amy Semple McPherson, for those of you who don't know, was the founder of the Foursquare Church,
Yes. Yeah.
Pentecostal movement,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
everything. God used her mightily. She held huge revivals. People were healed. Very pivotal figure. In
yeah,
the
if you
30s.
get to look her up online, she
Yeah.
was really a cornerstone in the Jesus movement
Yeah.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And she established Angela's Temple in downtown LA, which is still a viable Pentecostal
Yes.
church.
And what's interesting is back in 2016, my sister got a letter from Life Pacific College, and she didn't end up going, but I ended up going to Life Pacific and made the basketball team. And it wasn't until I got accepted inside the school that I found out that Life Pacific College used to be Life Bible College, which was founded by Amy Semple McPherson. And then you go to the 1936 yearbook, I believe, 34 yearbook.
I think it was 34.
And it turns out great-grandfather Whitey Flowers graduated
Yeah.
from Life Bible College
Yeah.
in that year. So we didn't know that until I got accepted. And it was like it was an amazing interview of generations.
Yeah.
I can remember the picture of seeing him
I
on
do
the
too.
picture.
I have it saved.
Yeah.
And we might throw it up on the stream.
Yeah.
But what's even cooler is God has made relationships through that. But if I didn't go to Life Bible College, I would have never met my dream girl.
That's right.
Ah,
That's right.
Yeah,
Oh my
'cause
gosh. Yeah.
I met Shay I reconnected with Shay through her sister Soraya, and it was 8 years later. Now it's 8 years later. But yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, God has his hand in everything.
Yeah.
Now, after he graduated and everything, and was a street preacher working for the Brightmans and all
Yeah,
that stuff, you were born, when were you born?
1946, August
So
22nd.
he graduated in like 34, 36.
Yeah.
And then you were born about 10
Right.
years
They were
later.
married in October of 45. I was born in August of 46.
Okay.
And he then took out his citizenship papers,
Okay.
and he changed his name legally.
To
so
Flowers.
I teased my mom, and I said, "You were born under an assumed name to an illegal alien. I'm not sure I'm legal."
That's funny. Now, growing up, he was Catholic out of
Yeah.
Catholicism, but
Yes.
Grandma Flowers was Pentecostal.
Dutch Reform.
Dutch Reform.
Dutch Reform.
Okay, so
Which
you
is not Pentecostal.
Not a Pentecostal.
at all.
No.
But he had Pentecostal with
Amy
Semple
McPherson. Yeah.
So you've had very interesting stories growing up where you went to one church in the morning and one church at
Right.
night.
We would
Tell us
do
about that.
Mass in the morning
Okay.
on Sundays, and then Pentecostal church in the afternoon.
Business in the morning, party in the night.
Yeah, and I entered parochial school, Catholic school in Long Beach, but I got rheumatic fever, so I couldn't go
Yeah.
much to school that year. And we moved into the San Gabriel Valley then to get away from the dampness, which is what I needed to have done to survive the rheumatic fever. And I went to Catholic school, St. Anthony's in San Gabriel, for 2 years. And we would, like I said, go to Pentecostal church in the afternoon and Mass in the morning. But I had a lot of questions that I would ask the nuns. You know, there was a lot of eschatology and stuff that was talked about in
Eschatology is end times.
End times.
Which is interesting because that will lead us into the next
Exactly.
part of the story. But
Exactly.
before that, go ahead.
I was kicked out of Catholic school at the end of second grade because I asked too many questions, and the Sister Superior called my parents in to the nunnery and said, your daughter would be happier someplace else. Get her out of here. And they were all happier too then.
Yeah.
Because they kept telling me, wait until you die and ask God. That's something you tell a 6 or 7 year old, you know.
So then you went to, was it Pentecostal church at night?
No, private school.
Private school.
I mean, I'm public school.
Yeah.
From parochial school, I went to public school.
But at nighttime, because you were kicked out of the Catholic school, now where'd you guys attend service at night? A church service?
We would still go to Pentecostal church in Sunday afternoon. Yeah, but we still do mass in the mornings and Pentecostal church in the afternoon.
So you got, it was like an ice cream cone with 2 scoops of ice cream on
Yeah.
the cone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I got baptized in the Catholic Church. I was confirmed in the Catholic Church. The whole ball of wax. Yeah.
So growing up, you had a foundation of knowing Jesus and a foundation of that. Now, fast forward, was there anything pivotal before you met Grandpa that was a pivotal moment in your life?
I was into Ouija boards a lot, and I went into a lot of studying demonology and things like that, ghosts and things like that. I got into that with my friends pretty deeply, and had some strange experiences with that.
What got you into all that?
I like to be scared. And that was a good way to do it. Now it's not, you don't get scared anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I got rid of that and had the realization that if God is in me, Satan has no power over me at all. And he may attack.
Yeah.
And I have discernment. I do know that. There's times when I'm not ever alone. And I'm not talking about...
Sure.
I'm not talking about angels. I know they're always there, but there's sometimes another form that's with it too.
Yeah, but he has no power over you.
He has no power over me.
We were talking yesterday about the scripture. It says, don't fear those who are able to kill the body, but fear him who is able to throw both soul and body in hell.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I saw this meme. This is a little off subject, but I saw this meme since we just had Christmas. It was... this guy was singing in church. He's like, jingle bells, I'm not going to hell. Amen to that.
That's cute.
But okay, so you started dabbling in that. You got pretty heavily involved.
Yes.
When you met Grandpa, were you still involved in that?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Now, when you met Grandpa, you have to give a little precursor. Your mom, great grandma, had a dream.
Yes.
About you meeting Grandpa.
Yes. When I was a child, she kept telling me, you're going to have a younger brother. And you're not too different in age. Well, by the time you're 10 or 12 or 13 years old and you hear this, it's like, okay, what's going to happen here? You're not going to adopt somebody, but and it never came about, so she stopped talking about it. So I was out at Mount Sac College, and I met Tom out there. We were both in the theater department, and we got together and we were going to go out on a date. So he came to pick me up one night.
Yeah.
And my folks were here, and he met my folks, and we went out on the date, and I got home. And the next day, she told me, she said, "That's who I dreamed about."
Wow.
Because we weren't very far apart, and he was younger. He's 3 months younger than I am.
Yeah.
And that's what she told me. She saw him in the dream.
And it was also a boy with dark hair, right?
Oh, yeah. It looked just like him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She said he's going to have different coloring from you. She kept telling me that. He's got dark hair. He doesn't look like you. But you're going to have a younger brother. That's what she thought, because she didn't ever think that would be my future husband.
You know, Shay had a dream or like a vision of her future husband. She had my color hair, and she only saw the back of him, like he was going into a doorway.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Wow. You guys got married very quickly. You guys met at Mount Sac.
We met in August. We got engaged in December, and we got married the next August.
And when you met Grandma, you kissed her hand, right? First time you met
Yes.
I did, yes.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well,
what was your first impression of Grandma?
I saw Grandma and I said, "Wow, what a great looking girl! I've got to get to know her better."
Yeah.
And I came up and I introduced myself to her.
Bold.
Yeah, I was bold. Yeah. And she put out her hand, I put out my
shake it,
hand
yeah.
like I was going to shake with her, and she put out her hand, and then I took it and kissed it.
Ooh.
And
Makes a great first impression.
Yeah. What was your reaction to that?
I was stunned a little bit because
Yeah.
people don't really do
No.
that.
yeah.
Great.
Anyway, that was our beginning, and then of course I talked to her
Uh-huh.
after that in a normal way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I decided I wanted to date her, so that's how the first date came about.
Yeah.
And of course, it was worked out wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
And from your story, you weren't really following the Lord,
No,
but you had a foundation.
Yeah.
But you guys weren't going to church,
No.
and you were still dabbling. So, what was the moment that you put all the witchcraft and demonology aside?
We lived in Iowa, and we were moving back out here.
So, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
You were working at the phone company. Great job, which
Right.
we covered, which we'll link the video so you guys can watch. And you guys' life was set here,
right?
Yep.
and you were making great retirement, whatever. And then Uncle Russ calls and said, "Hey, I need some help running some movie theaters in a little town called."
Well, I had been
Mount Pleasant.
urging him because
Mount
he was an
Pleasant.
actor, and I worked him through his last 2 years of college,
Mm-hmm.
and I had made a deal with him that if we had our daughter then, Josie, your mother,
Yeah.
and I said, if you work me through college so I can do what I want to do for the rest of my life, I will support the family as long as it takes. And so I was home with Josie, for we moved to and Russ was making films, and I said, you're an actor, why do you go work with this film company, and we'll move to Iowa. And so I had kind of urged him to do that, and then Russ came along and invited us to go, and he knew how I felt. So
You guys made a really big compromise. It was, we had to figure out, we want somebody home with my mom, want somebody home with Josie,
yeah,
and one's going to work, one's going to stay home, or one's going to go to school, one's going to work, and vice versa.
right,
That's very, very cool.
yeah.
And
Anyway, that's when we moved to Iowa.
so you guys moved to Iowa.
But the moving to Iowa was, I had graduated from college.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I had spent the first year as a substitute teacher. But as it got close to summertime, I said, wait a minute, there's no substitute teaching in the summertime. What are we going to do for money?
Yeah.
Because Maryann was staying home with Josie at that point. And that's when I got the job with the phone company. And as you said, we didn't have plans for any kind of movement at that point. My job at the phone company was a good enough job that we had started looking for a 3-bedroom house to buy.
Yeah.
And my family was here. My parents and my brothers and sisters had moved out to California after we were married, and they were now living in California. And all of our friends from college and
My folks were here.
and her folks were here. So our ties economically and socially were in Southern California.
Yeah. Wow.
And as we talked about previously, when Russ called me one day at the office, he got the office number and called me there and said, I want you to come and work for me at these movie theaters. At that point, he wasn't making movies. In fact, he had gotten a small business loan to buy the theaters, and one of the points in the loan was you could not use that money to make movies.
Wow.
So he wasn't allowed to make movies.
Yeah.
While he had the loan from the Small Business Administration to buy the theaters. So the idea of making movies was now pretty far removed because...
But he did have a history of making movies.
Well, he had made
made
movies.
The Blob, the original Blob with Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to tell you. Now, this thing had killed the doc.
Well, what was it?
Well, it's kind of like a mass that keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out. Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater.
And he'd
Yeah.
made a couple of other movies.
Yeah.
He made a movie called The Hostage,
Yeah.
and then he made another one called Fever Heat.
Yeah,
Wow.
with Nick Adams.
Those are made in Iowa, and so he certainly had a history of making films and desired to make films.
Yes.
he told me sort of reluctantly that he didn't realize when he got the loan for the theaters that it would prevent him from making the films. His original idea was, I'll make films, and if I own some theaters, we can show the movies in the theaters that I own to get them sort of started and publicity and all that stuff.
So you guys moved to Iowa.
Well, we did. He called me and said, I want you to come and work for me. And I said, well, I don't know anything about movie theaters or managing movie theaters or doing anything like that. And he said, well, I need somebody I can trust, somebody I can rely on.
Yeah.
You can learn how to do things, but I need somebody I can trust. And so I went home and talked to Maryann about it. And the next day, I said, I don't know why, but I think I ought to take this job, even though it means moving away from everybody that we know, moving to a town where we don't know anyone at all, taking a job that pays far less money than what I'm making now. But I think we ought to go. And she said, I think we should go.
Yeah, and we did have extended family back there. My mom was from Iowa, so I had lots of aunts and uncles, and you had aunts and uncles. And
we had relatives around, but nobody in the town that we lived in. The nearest one was maybe, an hour away or so?
Yeah, 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah. In Iowa, an hour away is a lot further than it is in California.
Definitely. Yeah. So, obviously, you get to work with Russ Doughton. Suddenly, we went over this in the video. And then you also get to work in the film as well.
Right.
So tell us, how did you get involved with Thief on the Night? We
were at a company picnic with Russ and Don Thompson and the office and everything. And I was bicycling and stuff with Josie, and Don Thompson asked if I had any experience in acting. And of course I had, because I had minored in that in college. And gone to the Pasadena Playhouse one summer, so I had an experience in that, and that's how I got into.
Yeah, and your character was
the bad girl.
The bad girl,
yeah.
Diane.
Yes.
Jerry and Diane.
Yes.